Hello everyone and welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low budget show. It's the show so low it has no budget. This is a show, for those of you who don't know, where I just talk about the stuff I want to talk about. If it exists, it's a thing that we can talk about. And this time around, we are probably talking about I've been hesitant to go into this one solely because I know how it's going to sound, and I'm very worried about how it's going to sound. So I like to talk about the news of the week. I'm not going to do that this week. There's not a lot of news to talk about. And I give recommendations at the end. I'm not going to give recommendations this week. There's no recommendations to talk about. Instead, we are going to take some time just to dive into the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where I think it's headed, what's really going on with this world, and can it sustain itself? And I think these are all important conversations to have just because there's got to be an end to it. And I don't mean that in like a negative way where it's like, oh, it's got to end, we can't do this forever. It's just like, you really can't do this forever, so there's got to be an end in sight. And I kind of wanted to do it like now because we just got out of seeing Thor: Love and Thunder, which is another divisive movie from Phase 4 that is showing audiences aren't willing to submit themselves to these anymore. We are also just weeks away from San Diego Comic-Con, where Marvel is said to be having a huge Hall H panel unveiling the future of their world. And I guess I kind of wanted to do this before that huge Hall H thing, because when we get there, we'll be doing a video on the GeekWave talking about the San Diego stuff. I just really wanted to talk about this beforehand, because knowing what we know now, it really is rudderless. Like, there's really no cohesive direction steeped into this once fine-tuned machine. And that can be bothersome and an advantage to this universe. So I have a couple things I do want to talk about for like why I think the bubble's going to burst sooner than later. But kind of just at the beginning, I just want to talk about where we are in terms of this franchise now, and why I think some of the recent outages from this franchise have been lackluster. And basically, it kind of comes down to this for me. Phase 4 is coming off of the biggest movie of all time. It might not be the highest grossing, but you will never in the history of cinema get that again. You just can't. You cannot do something like that again. And because of that, you can only go downhill. So you do a couple movies that people wanted to see, like Spider-Man and Black Widow, and those are just fan-pleasing, whatever the hell. You get new things out there like Shang-Chi and the Eternals, then you do television, which is expanding this new world in a big way. And the thing with all those is they are just going nowhere. And this is a thing that I think is so apparent in this phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is that they are trying something new. And I am in support of that. You need to try something new because, and this is such a complex situation in my opinion, because your audience clearly, like your mainstay audience, the ones who don't do what I do online, don't have vocal opinions on Twitter, they clearly don't care. They clearly don't care if you try something new. They are just here to see like a work of fiction brought to life with a funny joke and characters that are bright and fun. They don't care. But I think the people that is having the most effect on the current phase are the ones that are like, oh, Endgame was the capper. What else could you really do that's worthwhile? And then you have this new push being put into the system that's like, what if we tried new things? What if we used different filming techniques for Eternals? What if we have like a visionary director and editor for Doctor Strange? What if we went a full-on joking comedy for something like Love and Thunder? Are those choices brilliant or are they desperate? That's kind of the thing where I'm at right now, where it's like, I completely get the necessity where after a film like Black Widow, your critics are like, this is just the formula in a new paint job. I get that because there is a formulaicness to this and that happens, but it's also just, that's what your people want. I'm sorry to say, that's what people want. And I guess that's serviceable. And I completely see it from like Kevin's standpoint, the other producer's standpoint, where it's like you want to try something new because you are essentially a creator, you know? You don't want to just be like pigeonholed into one thing, just creating one type of story, one type of structure for the rest of your life, just putting a new character and a new actor in that forever. That's going to get stale. But I think the problem with that is your audience isn't looking for that change the way you are. And that's the kind of thing I personally, like, I'm struggling with that too, because I do this for a living. Like, I talk about movies and comic books and television and audio stories and all of those stuff. I talk about those. And because of that, I am more inclined to the critic side of things than I am just the mindless goon who can go to see anything. I have to be critical of these stories. I have to be critical of the direction and the narrative and everything being said behind the scenes and on screen. I have to be aware of those. And because of that, my opinion is more vocalized on platforms of social media because I have to do that for this. Same with other critics who are talking on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter. The critic bubble is in more places than one. So you are getting more opinions and ideas presented about a piece of art than you normally would. And because of that, these studios are also seeing these bigger increases in people talking about it. Like, I think the biggest change really is the influence of TikTok on things, because TikTok is just, we are not going to block, like if you filmed Love and Thunder, because there's clips of Love and Thunder on TikTok that you film on your phone, you put that up to your page on TikTok. They're not getting rid of that. They're not blocking it. So you're getting new access to these things, and thus there's this idea that like, oh, so now we can really engage with how people are reacting to this, and maybe it's not positive or maybe it's not this. It's really changed the way these companies are viewing material. I really think that, because it has to happen. It has to happen where you're like, oh, so if there's this clip on TikTok of a scene from Multiverse of Madness where it's like, here is the scene of Peggy Carter in that movie, right? And the comments are like, this is dumb, why did this happen? You will now have an easier reaction from the studio to be like, that's not where we should go then. It could go both ways, like, this is good, this is bad. And because of that, everybody can put their opinion on something out, and these opinions become vocal and viral, and that is the general public. And again, this is the thing, I struggle with this too. I'm no better than the studios at this point. The people who are the most vocal about this are still a small minority of the people that watch this. So Thor made like 300 million worldwide. Let's say about 50, not even 50, I would say maybe about 30 million of that would be from critics. Probably less. If we were just to give like an estimate, like let's say maybe like 5 to 10% of the audience that went to see Love and Thunder was actually like critics, people who are vocal online. That is still a small amount of people that went to see the film. And I think where the problem is with that is like these people who are on Twitter, who are on Instagram, like myself, who are like, this looks cheaply made. This story is so singular to everything else you've done. Those are the opinions you are hearing the most of. And that's a studio is like, oh, we should change that. And I think this is where the blockage comes from, like the studio to the audience. It's like, you are winning without actually doing anything. Like, say what you will about the MCU, and I have a lot of opinions on it that we're going to get into in this video. Say what you will about it. You don't have to change the formula to make the ground work. You know, you have proven this formula is working. Changing it is showing you that you don't know how to engage your audience right way. And that becomes a problem. That becomes, I think, the inherent groundwork for it's like listening to the wrong people is what's going to separate everything you do. That's going to be the problem. That's where the issues are coming from. And with that, there's these other things going on with there, which is like trying new things is fine, but does anybody want to see those new things is the other thing. And again, the vocal minority is the critics, and that happens. It's whatever. We can move past it. We can move on from it. It doesn't really matter. But I guess my thought on that is like, we're in this phase where we are trying something new, okay? We're trying something new. That's what this phase is. That's what we're doing. Suddenly you are seeing the cracks forming around this foundation that's not keeping it steady. It's not keeping it together anymore. Suddenly we have seen this studio that has built a foundation upon the essence of Hollywood. Like, they have cracked the code. No other studio in history has this good a track record in terms of box office and just fan engagement. It's never happened before. And suddenly you have the biggest movie of all time, and now that's what you've built. That is the top of your foundation. Everything else is breaking. Because, well, there's a lot of reasons but I think the primary thing with that is, where do you go from there, and is going anywhere else worth it? Is it really worth it? I don't think it is. And this is where I am thinking this is falling apart. And I really thought this after watching Love and Thunder. And I'm going to do a huge video, or a huge live show, I should say, talking about Love and Thunder the day after this comes out. So this comes out on Monday. On the Tuesday, I'll be doing a huge live show talking about Love and Thunder. And basically, I just really think this isn't sustainable anymore. Like, the way this has gone about since Iron Man has really changed the game for Hollywood, but I think we are starting to see why this is breaking, why this is no longer sustainable. And there's been a lot of just talks behind the scenes from people who work with Marvel. They're like, this is a lot of work. This isn't really rewarding anymore. And I get that. I can 100% believe that. So, is the bubble going to burst? That's kind of like the question I want to ask myself. I think if we were looking at this as a bubble, right? If this whole thing is a bubble, and I'm using a lot of metaphors here, but let's say this is a bubble, when is it going to burst? I think we are seeing a lot of pressure put onto that bubble to the point where if you were to touch it a little bit more, it's eventually going to snap. But the thing is, the people that are pushing the bubble are not the ones who are going to change everything. You know, it's kind of just like, it's the critics pushing on the bubble. It's making people realize this is a lot of pressure and not getting anywhere, but they're still making a lot of money. So there is the slow shift in direction where I think we're going to see one of two things happen. We're either going to see take greater risks, tell a different story, or go back to what worked for us. And I don't know which one they're going to go for. So let's take a minute to kind of talk about Phase 4, which is when the bubble started to be pushed and is about to burst. So we have the first movie to come out in Phase 4, which is Black Widow. And Black Widow is serviceable. It's a movie that should have come out years earlier. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just a piece of cinema that falls under the aspect of everything that came before it. It's like, this is the most cookie cutter you could do. There's no inherently interesting thing about it. It is just, this is it. There you go. That one comes out. Shang-Chi comes out, and Shang-Chi is like, this is a beautiful, methodical thing. Where it falls flat is the third act and the constant need for jokes. That holds it back from being something incredibly special. That is just a part of the system now. And I'm like, Shang-Chi is my favorite of all of these because it's actually beautiful to look at and it has a really good score and a great use of action. And then you have something like Eternals, which is a huge swing for the company. You get an Oscar-winning director to show up, get a bunch of characters that you're supposed to fall in love with instantly, and try something hard. And what I mean try something hard is like, take this huge, complex, ethereal story and just convert it into something digestible for your simplistic audience. I don't mean it as a criticism to say simplistic audience, but please note that the majority of people are not like you and I who are recording this and listening to this podcast. The majority of people going to movies are dumbasses who just want to be entertained. That is why they go to a blockbuster. Eternals is trying something, but it's also not trying something at the same time. It wants to push boundaries, but it's not pushing them enough. And that is just like, oh, so these things are no longer perfect. They are fallible. They can fall. They can get really low scores on Rotten Tomatoes. They can divide people into thinking Marvel is losing it. And that's fine. That happens, and we can accept that. Then you have something like No Way Home, which could arguably be the one thing that tops Endgame, where it's like the actors are coming back from the previous Spider-Man movies. But now that that has happened, and then you go to something like Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, where it's like Krasinski's here, Anson Mount is here, Patrick Stewart is here. You are suddenly becoming so self-aware in yourself that it's almost just like enclosing in on the bubble where nobody else can really like get inside to see what's going on. It's become too insider baseball of that aspect, where you're closing off the doors for other people to see what you're doing. And that itself is another problem with what we're doing with this era, where it's like the multiverse, the concept of more worlds and more identities, is going to become a tiresome bit. It's not just Marvel doing this. It's not just Marvel doing this. And I want to make that very clear. The same issues that I'm having with the MCU right now can be said about whatever's going on with the Flash movie and Michael Keaton, whatever's going on in the Sonyverse. Like, this is not just an MCU thing. The idea is people want to see a legacy sequel. They want to see these characters they know as opposed to an actual story. And that's the problem. Where I think No Way Home succeeded was it actually told a story. Where I think something like Loki failed was that it didn't tell a story, it was an exposition machine. And we'll get to that stuff in a bit here. And that is becoming an inherent problem with this too, where suddenly the bubble is shrinking because everything's now just like, here's Alfred Molina, here's Willem Dafoe, here's Jamie Foxx, here's Tobey Maguire, here's Andrew Garfield. All these people that you are familiar with, but how do you tell that as a compelling story to nobody else, to people who don't know? That's the problem with that too. And Spider-Man No Way Home is a film I think is serviceable. I have no real opinion on it. And that's the other thing I want to make very clear on a lot of these movies, is that after you release 4 of them a year and a shit ton of television shows, they all just start to blend into nothing. And that sucks. So Spider-Man comes out, changes the game, leads directly into Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, which is a film I really don't like. And this to me is like the clear example of trying something new is really going to eliminate the audiences that doesn't care about cinema. Because I think the only aspect about Multiverse of Madness I really love is that it's trying a visual style that is so different than anything else this universe has tried. That to me is like they got Raimi to do something brilliant, but he had to work within the confines of this system, and that's where it pushes itself away from being good. It wants to be something creative, it's not allowed to do so, and suddenly is trapped in this weird amalgamation of just a bunch of stuff that doesn't flow well, doesn't go anywhere, can't catch a break. And that sucks. And I wish it was better, because it's one of the best looking movies that Marvel has ever made, but it's such a boring story with basic story plots, and everything about it falls apart, except for the transitions, except for the editing. That is where it is blown out of the water from anything else it's ever done. And that is where the audience is like, this is stupid and doesn't work. And some people think it's brilliant. I'm glad for those people. Some people think it's terrible. I understand those people. Then we have Thor: Love and Thunder that came out this week. And it's another one where it's like, some people think this is brilliant, some people think it's bad. I understand both sides, but the truth is, it is just there. And that's the other thing too, where a lot of these movies and a lot of these shows are just filling space until we can show you what we're doing in store. And the fact that this studio has been able to do 2 years of complete fucking filler with just the most expensive productions ever is saying something about a studio that they are high on their own supply, you know? And that is a thing you don't want to do, is be so attention starved that you are suddenly like, we can put out whatever we want and audiences will love it. And this to me just comes in the form of like, they started to do television. And I am still not convinced on the television side of things. I've done reviews for every show on television that the MCU has put out. There's only one that I think is actually really brilliant, and that is Miss Marvel. And I'm still doing the weekly Miss Marvel reviews if you want to check those out. So we're not going to talk about Miss Marvel here, but the first one is WandaVision. It's the most insane thing the studio's ever done, because it's actually really daring to do your first 2 episodes in black and white like it's the freaking Dick Van Dyke Show. Kids don't know what that is. That's really brilliant. And then it just becomes basic and boring as it goes on. I still really like WandaVision. The first half of WandaVision is some of my favorite stuff the MCU has ever done. And then it just becomes whatever. We have to make it cinematic for these stupid kids. Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Again, it's like, this could be a really fun concept if you stuck to one theme. If you gave Sam more to deal with aside from like, the people don't like me because of racism. Well, let's actually see that happening. Aside from one bank guy being like, we can't give you a loan because you have no money. Well, why not say something else besides that? Why not go more in depth with that? Then we have Loki, which is a show I do not like. It's just exposition to explain what's coming up so you're aware of things. What If? I don't give a shit about it. It means nothing to me. It's absolutely nothing. Hawkeye is the most abysmal piece of cinema the studios ever put out. Hawkeye, to me, is the prime example of, like, who gives a fuck? We'll just say it's the Fraction and Aja run and people will watch it. It's bad. Everything about that is bad. We're going to just tease you a little bit of D'Onofrio in here so you suddenly think we're relevant again. And once again, you are becoming too insider baseball where it's like, here's D'Onofrio, here's Cox. They all come back. Look how good we are. We're giving you what you want. Instead of actually having to try, they are just like, here you go. Instead of just like being like, we're actually going to pause the story so you can see Wilson Fisk is the one you know from Daredevil. It's like, we get it. That's not special or interesting. Then we have Moon Knight this year. And those of you who don't know that might be listening to this, Moon Knight is my absolute favorite comic book character, one of my favorite characters in literature. I don't know what they did to that show, but it just became so bloated and messy, and turning a street-level character into this weird Egyptian big battle laser sky thing. It's really weird to me, and I don't think it works too well. But then, of course, Miss Marvel, which is going on right now, is actually brilliant because Miss Marvel is the only Disney Plus show that really felt like it was serialized storytelling where it's like each episode will have a beginning, a middle, and an end, as opposed to just ending the scene and starting up with the next one the next week. It's not an extended movie. It is 6 episodes of television that are really good. That is brilliant to me. That is the one shining star, I think, in all of this phase where I think Miss Marvel's like, we're actually going to do something cool. The rest of it is just simplistic, cookie cutter, insider baseball-y, doing stuff that doesn't work for anything, extended bullshit that doesn't really have any impact on anything creatively, financially, or literally. And that's a shame. And I think looking at all of those things I've talked about, you see more than any other thing, whether you like Ant-Man and the Wasp or whether you like anything else, these things have become divisive. And that is the problem. You are seeing, hey, the shows aren't perfect anymore. Moon Knight is mixed. Hawkeye is mixed. Multiverse of Madness is mixed. Thor Love and Thunder is mixed. These things, they aren't keeping their weight anymore. They're just becoming too much. And this is the other thing too. When you release this much content a year and you have to keep up to date and watch all of it and everything, what does any of it matter if one week you have to watch this episode of Moon Knight and then you have to watch Multiverse of Madness and that leads directly into Miss Marvel, then Thor Love and Thunder comes out, and then the longest break I think we're going to get before something is the week from, what is it? The finale of Miss Marvel is right now, like this week, and then I Am Groot comes out on the 10th of August, and that's the longest break we're getting. One thing every week, that is hard to keep up with, and that is going to really alienate you from the rest of your audience. It really is. So we got a phase with no clear direction, a million things you need to watch every day and every week, and nobody wants to go to cinemas anymore. How does that bode well for a franchise that is built on the cinematic experience? And that's another thing. I really think people are forgetting this is supposed to be an experience. These movies are supposed to feel like you're watching something special. And this is the kind of thing that really sucks when we see it happen every day. You lose what makes it special. Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. I know that's like a cliche thing to say, but when the MCU is happening every week, is it really interesting? Is it really special? Or is it just a million things going on that are supposed to lead into a larger narrative that aren't? And that is a huge, huge problem that this is all having, because now we have to watch like a million shows that go nowhere and they don't connect into anything. You're supposed to think like, this is powerful, but it's not really anything, and it's just suddenly more of a burden to keep up with it than it is to actually enjoy it. And that's a problem. And because there is so much content happening, so much of it happening, suddenly, it stops being joyful, and suddenly you are putting too much pressure on everyone involved to get the full picture. And that's making your bubble burst a little bit. It's just putting more pressure on our bubble, where it's like, oh, you can't really enjoy the Marvels movie if you haven't seen Miss Marvel. You can't really enjoy Miss Marvel unless you've seen Inhumans because she might be connected to that. You can't really enjoy scenes in Miss Marvel unless you've seen Shang-Chi, and Moon Knight might not be connected to anything, but there's gods in that, and gods are in Thor Love and Thunder. And there's huge god stuff happening in Wakanda Forever, presumably. And suddenly, No Way Home has to lead into Multiverse of Madness, which is connected to Loki, which is also connected to WandaVision. The fact that all of it is connected, but fumbling around what it's supposed to be, is the problem. And the thing is, everyone's like it's leading to incursions, and No Way Home is like right in there to Secret War, and all this stuff is leading to like the big thing with Fantastic Four. I argue you this. Is anything going to be that exciting if we've already established what Endgame was? Endgame is the once-in-a-lifetime thing. You can never repeat Endgame again. You just can't. There is nothing you could physically do in terms of storytelling that will recapture the magic of Endgame. I don't care how big Secret Wars is. And Secret Wars shouldn't even be that big. But it's just nothing special is going to be happening again, and that's the problem. So if all of these things happening, supposedly leading to a big thing, it is just more void filling until everything bursts. And it's so, I don't want to sound rude about it, but I think within my lifetime, I know Feige was like, we got 10 more years planned out of this stuff. In my lifetime, I think we'll see the end of these. And not just the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think these will slowly fade back away into what they were, which is just whatever. Not like they're doing anything original anymore. They obviously have years of source material to play off of, but they're just not sustainable. They're just not interesting. I remember seeing Love and Thunder with a group of people who just didn't give a shit. And I'm like, if these people who are not me, who aren't as engrossed in this world and know every detail, aren't fascinated by it like they should be, is this going to work anymore? Is this going to be sustainable? Can we keep this momentum going forever? I don't think you can. I think the trying examples are having people just watch these television shows. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but you put that on top of the movies and you just suddenly realize they're really simple. They're just long movies that are already cliche. And you look at the other content around it. I'm not criticizing the MCU for taking the easy way out on a lot of its shows. All I'm saying is you look at a lot of the other superhero content that has come out this year that has blown people away. Hell, even the non-superhero content that's come out this year that's blown people away. Stranger Things, The Boys, Peacemaker, Umbrella Academy. I would even, I don't know if there's other stuff you could put in there, but I think those are like the primary big ones. I guess you could say the Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Looking at those, they are just better paced, better written. They're more interesting to look at visually, and they're actually trying to be creative. And look, say what you will about Moon Knight and Loki, they are just clearly ripping off something better than it, and that's the problem. And this is another problem that I think is slowly becoming a bigger deal than I think people are realizing. I really got to say this because I don't think people understand how big a deal this is going to become as the stories progress. You heard Jeremy Slater talk about how they wanted to change Moon Knight because he's too much like Batman. You heard people talking about Gore the God Butcher having his face look like Christian Bale because they didn't want the comparisons to Voldemort. You clearly see that Tenoch Huerta's Namor is being changed to the Mayan stuff, more so for Atlantis, because they don't want the comparisons to Aquaman. The thing with that is they are actually scared of being compared to things they are ripping off. And I'm not saying Moon Knight's a ripoff of Batman. I'm not saying Gore's a ripoff of Voldemort. I'm not saying Namor's a ripoff of Aquaman. I'm simply saying they want to try to look original as opposed to doing what makes the characters interesting in the first place. Making Gore look like that does take away from something special about him. He suddenly just becomes a nameless character of nothing interesting going on. Making Moon Knight into that character literally takes away from makes that character special. And we'll see what happens with Namor, but that's the one I think is actually going to break the mold and do something cool with Namor. It's just they are so desperate to look different that they're actually missing what makes the thing special in the first place. What made Ant-Man work wasn't that it's like, oh, we're changing the mold. Look how different this is. We're ripping off heist movies. You get it. You know the formula. You understand what we're doing here. Why change it, you know? I think that's going to become a very big deal for some people, and I think a lot of people are going to start taking notice to that more so now because it is something to notice, you know? When they do Atlantis, how different do you think they're going to make it look from the Aquaman Atlantis? When we see Moon Knight again, do you think they're going to try to distance that from anything a Batman movie could look like coming out at the time? Just you wait. They're going to try harder to do that. And that, to me, again, is taking away from what makes the character special. You should be honored. And this is not... I did a whole video talking about how Moon Knight is not Marvel's Batman, but those are not comparisons you should shy away from. I think removing those comparisons actually hurts your character because now you're taking away the thing that could draw people in. They're like, oh, he's kind of like Batman, but he's like steeped in mythology and he might have this mental illness in his head. That's kind of more interesting than just like, why don't you watch the story of this guy you don't know who clearly looks like he's connected to something you do know? It's a really weird system that they're trying to do, and I don't think it's working. And again, it's putting pressure on that bubble where suddenly it's like, okay, so you want to do like a Fantastic Four thing, but how different are you going to make it? You want to put Kang in an Ant-Man movie, like a Quantum Realm. Is that going to be worth it? Like, how much can you really get out of this momentum anymore? Like, are the Thunderbolts just going to look like the Suicide Squad? Are we going to change them up so much that you can't draw the comparisons to Suicide Squad? And if we do the young teen heroes, are people going to be like, is this like Titans? It's like, how far are they willing to stray that line before you realize they're really just trying not to look like anything else as opposed to making something good? That could be the problem. Maybe that's why Love and Thunder was cut down so much to be like a stripped bare bones nothing. Just because they don't want to compare it to maybe, I don't know, something better. I don't even know what's better. Everything's better. It's very weird to me. And again, the whole multiverse thing is going to be very tiresome within a week. Like, as soon as we see like the big incursion bullshit coming, this concept is going to be dead on arrival because where do you go? Who cares? It's not going to matter. And that it takes the stakes away from any storytelling, honestly. And that is a problem that this is going to have. It just takes away from any real storytelling. And the other thing, too, just kind of like a behind-the-scenes thing. So we're seeing all this happen. A divisive Phase 4, too much content to watch, desperately trying to look different and new, no clear direction. And if you do get that direction, is it going to be worth it for the build-up? All of that is being put onto the bubble. All of that pressure is coming down onto this bubble, making it about to burst. You also got this happening, okay? You have this happening. Top Gun Maverick. And I don't want to harp too much on Top Gun Maverick when we're talking about this, but this is the movie that changes the game. I'm sorry, it is. This Top Gun Maverick is the film that changes everything going forward because suddenly you have a couple things. You don't have to be jokey, funny, 4-quadrant bullshitty to make $1 billion anymore. You don't have to be just simplistic bullshit referencing whatever the hell. You can tell a cohesive, serious story aimed for an older demographic that is brilliant to look at, visually stunning, great acting, great character motivations that sometimes references the old stuff, and it's going to do well and have better box office legs than anybody expected. Did anybody aside from Tom Cruise expect such a low drop-off for 8 weeks of Top Gun? I don't think anybody did. And that is just something the MCU can't do. You look at like the biggest drop-offs from the last couple of films, they have been over 50% sometimes. That's insane. That is insane. But Top Gun's like 23, 9. It's like, that is crazy. You don't see that anymore. And I just know you are looking at these other studios, looking at like not even just Marvel and Warner. It's just like, how do we do that with a property we have? How many other studios do you think are like, we made this cult classic in the 80s. Can we make that relevant in that tone today? It changes the game. It really does. And suddenly, a Marvel movie is not the top movie at the box office anymore. Doctor Strange did not pass $1 billion. Only one movie did. It's Top Gun Maverick. Thor might top it, but still, we have to see how that box office drops in this week. I know it's a weird thing to say, and I kind of talked about this last week when I did my live show. This, Top Gun Maverick, and The Minions Rise of Gru, I should say. Those, I think, are the two films that are going to show you this year that Marvel movies are not going to top the box office. Because Top Gun already did it. Top Gun is already showing you. Maybe Thor and maybe Black Panther could top it, but I don't know. I think there's too much going on with Thor right now that people aren't going to be invested to see it. I think the 45-day window is going to hinder people from going to cinemas to see it. And I think Black Panther has too much kerfuffle going on to get you interested in that topic right now. Top Gun's going to stay number one, I think, for a very long time. Minions: The Rise of Gru had an incredible opening weekend. It had mass teenagers, which is such a hard demographic to get to the theater because they're just going to stay at home and watch Stranger Things. Getting that demographic to the theaters is so hard to do. And the fact that they turned it into a meme, a viral sensation, is something the MCU can never do. Here's the other thing about the MCU in its current state. Name one iconic thing from any of those films that has any cultural relevance in terms of meme culture or popular culture that is a staying factor. Aside from just people shitting on an aesthetic, shitting on a concept, maybe, I guess you could say some of like the spider meme stuff, but not really. Not really. They don't have their gentle minions. They don't have their It's Morbin time. And say what you will about Morbius, it's a shit movie that shouldn't have been made. But at least there's a cultural staying power involved in that where suddenly it's connected to a meme. Is there any viral memes going around for No Way Home or Multiverse of Madness or Eternals anymore? Is there? Is anybody talking about those films except from a critical standpoint of like, this is a $250 million movie, this is a terrible looking shot, why is this all so bad? They don't have that. And the thing is with that too, Top Gun didn't have those either. All it had was brilliance put on screen and behind the camera. And it just showed you don't have to joke to make it work this big. And I know it's such a dumb thing to say, and it might not make any sense to people, but I really think this. I really think one of the huge contributing factors to this bubble that has so much pressure on it already, one of the huge contributing factors is going to be Top Gun Maverick and Minions: The Rise of Gru. I think both of those films are putting so much pressure onto this franchise, this huge blockbuster, that the sequel to a 30-year-old movie and a sequel that is 7 years in the making to an animated film are being more well-received and well-respected than movie 28 in your long-lasting storybook. That is insane. That is something we shouldn't see. Like, how is that the thing happening? And the other thing with that is, too, like I said, the 45-day window is going to kill people's excitement for this. That window is fascinating to me. I completely understand it I think it's because of the pandemic and COVID. It's like people would rather stay home and watch it. But when you do that, it's this thing I've been trying to get. I've been in the real world, and this is not the real world. This is just talking on this shit. In the real world, this thing I've been trying to explain to people is that Netflix is not sustainable because everybody who has Netflix is already watching Netflix. Nobody new is getting Netflix. So how are they getting more money? It's through other third parties, you know? That's how they're getting it. Disney won't do that. Disney isn't going to be like, well, now we have to contribute to this smaller studio. They kind of got FX, but that's also just like already owned by them. Now they have those things, right? How are they going to make money if every movie that they make comes to their streaming service really recently? You know, I still don't understand how things like Hawkeye and Moon Knight and Miss Marvel have such big budgets. It doesn't make sense to me why any of those shows need such a big budget. How is that sustainable? How can that like company, how can that streaming service sustain, let's say, 4 shows at $150 million per show? How is that sustainable? And how do you do that when you drop 3 of those movies, let's say $200 million movies, onto that platform too? That's like $1 billion, give or take. Let's just say roughly $1 billion. How do you make that back? Are they making that much in sales on that property? I don't think they are. And suddenly that's just the point where it's like, scale it back a little bit and you can do more stuff there. But you look at like, I know it's a weird thing to say. I'm trying to be very positive on this, but you look at just like the cultural significance around Stranger Things and Obi-Wan Kenobi. They are permeated in pop culture so easily Name one staying thing in any of the new stuff from these movies that really benefits anybody that has people thinking. Nothing really sticks. They're all just reactions now, and nothing fully stays. Like, say what you will. I don't really watch Stranger Things, but I can't go a second without seeing that show talked about. I thought Obi-Wan was okay, but I completely see how this is going to change the perspective for a lot of people on these shows. And I just don't understand how Disney Plus makes its money. I know Obi-Wan is on Disney Plus, but to me it's just surprising that this is where they're going to put their money in. Because I can get the theater experience. If they were to drop Love and Thunder right now, because they did drop it. If Love and Thunder's out right now, it's not coming to streaming in 45 days. I think there's a bigger window for them to do something interesting. And I think more people would be willing to see what that's going to be. But we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. I really don't know anymore. I just don't know if that. So yes, streaming is killing the cinematic experience. The other thing about this too, this is a big deal too. Kind of like when I talked about like how Marvel wants to not be associated with other stuff. Another big deal is this new volume technology is going to be the death of cinema. That's a huge freaking statement, I know. But the thing is, if we can use this on the cheap, we can make stuff look cheap on the cheap too. So instead of like trying, we don't have to. And this is, I will stand by this statement. No show has used the volume technology, or no movie or no idea has used the volume technology quite like The Mandalorian. That first season of The Mandalorian, and the second season actually, they fully understood how to use this technology that they created for this show. Love and Thunder didn't do it well. It looked hideous. The lighting was off. The backgrounds were off. Everything was cheap and bad. And now that every other movie is going to try to use this technology, you can pump out this shit faster, quicker, and lazier. And that is going to be like, oh, they're in the volume. They're really making it bad. And again, this technology is brilliant, but it's not going to be used appropriately unless the right hands are involved. And from what we've seen from Marvel, they're not. I don't want to harp on this too much. I'm going to talk about this more when we talk about Love and Thunder tomorrow. There's currently a lot of buzz going around online about people that worked with Marvel in the VFX department who are like, we are overworked, we are underpaid, we hate this, I don't want to work with this company again. I 100% buy that. Whether those stories are true or not, or it's just people being assholes online, I can 100% believe that people that work for that company would not want to work with them for the way they do that stuff, because it is so rushed. This is the thing about video games. Everyone's like, I want to make a video game, until you have to make it for the big companies, and they push you to no end, and suddenly you are overworked, underpaid, and your thing looks like shit, but you can't stop because of what the expectations are for the fans. And the thing is too, what I notice in a film when the CG looks bad, or when the VFX look bad, or when editing is off, or the directing looks shit, I notice those things because this is what I do. That's what I look for. Just some plain old schmuck off the street, they're not going to notice that. They're not going to notice that unless it's egregious. The problem is with the Marvel stuff, it is so plainly done that it is noticeable, but people who don't notice it aren't going to see the problem. I talk about this every time. The blurred out backgrounds of a shallow depth of field is the ugliest thing the studio has done. You are going to notice that pain. You're going to understand why it's so ugly, and it's going to kill stuff. And the volume, just having a big 360 screen, it's cool, but that makes it lazier to do work, doesn't it? And suddenly things don't look special anymore. So if we use that for every other consecutive movie, because Love and Thunder, it's the big example, you could only imagine they're going to be using it for Fantastic Four, for Quantumania, for Blade probably, for Guardians, absolutely for Guardians, it's going to look bad. Because the proven track record is, you don't have a good lighting department in these things, your VFX is already overworked, how is any of this going to look special anymore? And when everything becomes this really dull looking thing, what's the point of doing anything special? Another pressure being added to the bubble that's going to make it burst really soon. And this is another thing I kind of want to talk about. I think it's very important. I did talk about this a little bit already, where I'm like, the people online aren't actually always the people watching it. It's like 5% of the people. Nobody can handle talking about film anymore. I try to be positive about stuff. I really do. But the thing is, I go to the Reddit forums, I go to the Twitter pages, I look at all of this stuff because, not because I have to, it's just more like I'm going to because I think it's important. I have never hated a discourse more in my life than just listening to people talk about Love and Thunder on Reddit. Like they have the mega thread on the spoilers page. I just remember looking at that and going, is this me? Is this what I'm doing? This is so boring. I don't care. This is so lazy and stupid. I'm tired. And I think between too many people talking about the same shit on a show like this or the same shit on a movie like this and not understanding basic themes in other television. Look, say what you will about The Boys, but some people clearly didn't get that Homelander and Soldier Boy are not the people to idolize. Say what you will about all that, okay? The fact that film literacy is literally dead and some people can't understand what is being said in front of them, and the fact that everybody's talking about the same thing, it goes back to this thing about the oversaturation of the market, where suddenly everything is being said. Everything is being done. Nobody has anything else to say. And the oversaturation thing goes between like too much content, but also too much people talking about the same content. It's why I was very hesitant to do this video talking about the MCU. I don't get enjoyment talking about this anymore. That is slowly because Phase 4 is so divisive and boring, but it's like I am not adding anything to the discourse. I would rather sit here and talk about shows like Apple TV's Physical, The Old Man of Jeff Bridges, Only Murders in the Building. These are shows that are really creative and I want to talk about, but I don't have a platform to do that. I know I built this on comics and stuff, but suddenly you're just like, what am I really adding to this? And that's going to get really stale and boring really quick. The oversaturation of podcasters and reviewers and critics saying the same shit about these basic films that have nothing cohesive or interesting to say, that sucks. You're destroying the critic industry too, and like the review industry, where it's like, who cares? What is any of this? We're all just going to say the same thing. Where's the interest? Where's the fun? And I think just because people can't understand film, it's going to hurt it. You know, when people can't see the core message of Doctor Strange, you know there's a problem. When people can't look at Peacemaker and understand it's a satire, there's a problem. When people, like, it's so frustrating. And I think that's going to be the death of it too. Just more pressure on this thing. I do want to talk a little bit more about the oversaturation of stuff, because this is, if anything, there, and I can tell you the response some people might say right now, okay? But there's like 50 books a week that come out from Marvel. Yeah, who the fuck reads all 50 of them? Nobody. Nobody's reading every single book that Marvel pumps out. The fact that you have to see every single thing that Marvel pumps out in the cinematic universe, that's painful. You know, why do I have to watch 6 episodes of Loki, Hawkeye, and Moon Knight to fully understand anything going on? It's crazy to me. And the fact is, like, they're saying all of these things matter, but they don't. And that's the other problem too. There's just too much of it. There's too much of it where it's like it oversaturates your market. And it really sucks. Can we really sustain 5 shows a year and 4 movies a year? That is a lot of stuff in this universe. A lot of boring shit too. And I don't know if it's going to sustain itself. I don't know if it has the legs to keep going. That really, really annoys me to no end. Another thing I really want to talk about, and I don't know if like this is more of just like something I need to bring up in terms of the MCU or just outside of that. This won't last if Feige stops. Like, he is a rarity in this universe. He can't make it work. Once he decides it's over, it's over. No one can capture that magic again. I think he's got a few more years in him to get this shit going, but I don't know if this is going to work anymore. Well, if he stops, it's done. And I'm glad he's still excited, but clearly he's slowing down the speed, right? Just in terms of like care, where he's like, yeah, I'll trust directors to make a thing. And maybe that trust in the other people to get the job done is what's been hindering it. Maybe he is just too loose now, and suddenly there's no real guideline towards any of it. Maybe that's the problem going on here, but I don't know. And personally, this final thought I kind of have, well, I don't know if it's the final thought. This thought I have is kind of a personal one to me. that is making the bubble for me burst more instantly, which is just, I hate that they always make fun of their previous movies inside their movies. It's really frustrating. So Doctor Strange jokes about No Way Home, Love and Thunder jokes about Ragnarok and The Dark World and all that shit. It's just like, if you can't take your previous work seriously, why should I? In Far From Home, they make that stupid joke about Endgame, where it's like the PowerPoint. And I'm like, if you can't take the biggest event seriously, why should I give a shit about what you're doing? It is very frustrating, and it just annoys me to no end. It just annoys me to no end. And that is just another thing that's a personal thing that's just putting pressure on the bubble for me that's going to make it burst. So we talked a lot about a bunch of shit involving the movies, the behind the scenes, things I think are happening in the popular culture that are leading to this bubble bursting. Let's get down to it. When is this bubble going to break? I have a couple ideas of when we're actually going to see the bubble break. Here's one. San Diego Comic-Con this year. Once we know the end game for this phase, I think we're going to see people be like, okay, cool, I'll just wait to watch it on Disney+. The numbers will go down in theaters. We'll see not everybody's watching the shows like She-Hulk or Secret Invasion or I Am Groot. We'll stop them. I think Fantastic Four is going to be a huge litmus test for how long people are going to put up with this shit. I think X-Men is going to be like, if we're starting another huge franchise, how long can that sustain itself? How long are people going to be engrossed in it? I know I love the Fantastic Four. I'm a fan of the X-Men sometimes. Those are two big properties. I don't know if I need to see an entire universe built around them again, because that is a lot of stuff to still do, and it's a lot, and these movies are a lot, and the fact they're just part of another huge scope in here is frustrating. It's frustrating. So those things, I think whatever Secret Wars turns out to be, there's just like a smaller stuff I think is going to be the personal test. The Thunderbolts movie could be the death of it. If that becomes like Suicide Squad light, I think people are going to be like, oh, who cares? DC is making darker edge movies anyways, you know? And again, Marvel says they're taking chances, but here's the thing. Here's the actual thing. And it's not an apt comparison in the slightest. I think it's actually a really bad comparison. But what I'm going to say is this. Eternals has one gay kiss. Thor Love and Thunder has Valkyrie say she had a girlfriend. Korg might have two dads. Okay? The Harley Quinn animated series depicts Harley and Ivy going all the way. You know? There are lesbian couples in Peacemaker. Just saying. Peacemaker is canonically bisexual. Just saying. We're not shying away from that fact. We are showing you those open things happening in those platforms. You know? DC is willing to say certain things that these things aren't. And I think that's going to just interest people more than just Disney's boo-hoo, they're gay kind of. So that's another thing that's going to make a burst. But here's what I really think is going to make the bubble burst. And this is just outside forces working against it. I think whatever Sony wants to do with Spider-Man, whatever DC is going to do with their Michael Keaton shit and Ezra Miller, whatever these outside forces are pushing on the other side of the bubble to the point where it's just going to pop it together. So you have the divisive universe with these really interesting films that don't do nothing, with people working on the films that don't know where they're going, a creativeless direction and all this bullshit that we talked about. You have Sony and the Monsterverse and the DC universe and Transformers and all these other cinematic universes showing you that they might be able to do it, just pushing on that from the other way. And then on top of the bubble, you have Top Gun Maverick and The Rise of Gru pushing downwards, being like, hey, we don't have to try so hard. We just make a good movie and everything's fine. And that's how the bubble bursts. The bubble is going to burst the minute we see the multiverse get too explosive, the minute we see DC try to keep up steady pace with them by releasing countless shows and stuff, the minute that the spum universe with the Sony Pictures universe and Marvel pieces of shit gets too cohesive and they want Tom Holland back, and the moment that we realize, oh, People actually want to see the next David O. Russell movie. People would rather see the Damien Chazelle movie. People would rather see Barbie with Greta Gerwig. People would rather go to these auteur directors making their vision properties than whatever bullshit Taika can pump out for Thor 5. Whatever random shit is being made for the MCU. All of those forces are working against this thing. All of those forces are going to break the MCU bubble. And I'm saying it now, folks. I am saying it now. By 2030, if we are still balls deep in the MCU, nobody is going to give that much of a shit about it. It's just going to be another thing that is happening. And we're just going to collectively moan when they announced the 14th Captain America film with America Chavez taking on the role and Charlie Cox is 64 playing Daredevil against the recasted Finn Jones. Who cares? That being said, if you do care and this is still something you're invested in, I'm here to tell you, please like other things. I'm glad you love the MCU and I'm glad you can support this franchise, but this is not sustainable. The bubble will burst, and I'm here to tell you there's millions of other things you can watch that are more entertaining than mediocrity. Learn to like other things. But if you can't, that's fine. Please enjoy this stuff. Please live with them. Please be happy to do this. So, in conclusion, these movies aren't good anymore. They look bad. The internet can't handle this anymore. Fans aren't seeming to notice the problems. Outside forces are working against them. Kevin Feige loosened his grip. None of this matters. Everything sucks. The MCU bubble is going to burst within the decade. Mark my words, Top Gun and the Minions are the two most impressive movies this year. Yeah. You know what? I could even throw RRR in there. I could even throw the Batman in there because they're just like, we don't need 40 fucking movies to show we're impressive. We're just impressive on our own. But I'm not going to throw them in there. It's Top Gun and Minions. The bubble will burst, my friends. The bubble is bursting sooner than later. Please, please, please don't hate me for this one. Please know, I wanted to say there, please know I love these movies, but that's not the truth anymore. The truth is, I don't love them. I admire what is happening. But if it fails, I hope it does. I actually do. I actually hope it fails because we don't need this anymore. We can't sustain it anymore. Let's move on and try something new, you know? Let's get other things going. I was going to do a bubble noise, but I don't know what a bubble noise is. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you for listening to this huge rambling about me talking about the MCU. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. You can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.